We're getting older now, but we all remember the video games that mean the most to us. From Earthbound to Zelda and everything in between. Join me, Metroids Primed, as I take you on a journey to show you the video games that changed my life. Hey guys, welcome back for another episode. Today I wanted to do a video on my top 10 Super Nintendo games of all time. And of course, this is no definitive list, this is just my personal opinion, but I have some great games here, so let's check them out. And starting off at number 10, I've got E.V.O, The Search for Eden. And this is a really interesting side-scrolling platformer by Square Enix, and you know, what's interesting about it is you start off kind of at the beginning of Earth's time, and you create a character with certain attributes or a certain creature. And as time goes on, as millions of years pass, and depending on how you play that character, it evolves. And I want to say there's like 50 different variations of the character, how it can turn out. And it's just a really interesting game. And it's actually a pretty hard one to find out there. It's turned out to be quite rare on the Super Nintendo. But a great game if you have an emulator and you can't necessarily get a hold of a physical copy of the game. Check it out. It's a really good game. But E.V.O. Search for Eden. And number 9, Demon's Crest. It's a really dark, side-scrolling platformer. And it's the third in the series of the Gargoyle's Quest games, and just a really dark tone to it, but great gameplay and just a good game from Capcom. And coming in at number 8 is one of my favorite series, Castlevania. And Castlevania 4 was just an amazing addition to the series. Just taking the step up from the NES to the Super Nintendo, this game was just amazing. Great platforming action game right here, and definitely one of the best games in the entire Castlevania series. Now, call me crazy, but coming in at number 7, I've got Yoshi's Island. And I like Super Mario World, but for me personally, Super Mario World 2 was just a great game. And I think the reason that it stands out for me was the different art style in this game. And I have just fond memories of that last battle with Bowser, and he was massive. And it's just one of my favorite boss fights in any game, but just a great game overall. If you've never played Yoshi's Island, definitely check it out. And coming in at number 6, I have one of my favorite RPGs of all time, and that is Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. And take all of your favorite characters from the Super Mario games and put them in an RPG. And that's what this is. It's great, RPG for the system. Definitely one of the top RPGs that I've ever played. And I think it still holds up to this day. Graphics were great at the time. Definitely when they were having to go up against a lot of the big RPGs for the Super Nintendo, the Earthbounds, the Chrono Triggers, Final Fantasies. This definitely held up. And coming in at number 5, I have Earthbound. And Earthbound is definitely one of the most unique RPGs you'll ever play. And I think one of the reasons that it's so beloved by so many people still is that Earthbound was set in modern times, in a modern day town, with modern day kids, and I think that's why it hit home for so many people. But an amazing game. If you've never played Earthbound, if you have the means, definitely get it on Super Nintendo, but if not, it just came out on the Nintendo Wii U marketplace, so you can play it for relatively cheap now, as where just a couple months ago you had to buy it on Super Nintendo, and the card alone could cost over $100. But definitely a really great game, one of my favorite RPGs of all time. And coming in at number 4, I have one of the greatest beat 'em ups of all time, and that is Turtles in Time. And to me, one of the reasons this was so good is when, we had all played Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, in the actual arcade. And, when it was ported to the NES, it just didn't compare graphically to what the arcade was. And of course, this was the arcade game first. And, when it was ported to the Super Nintendo, it was so close to what the arcade was. And, it felt like you had brought the arcade back home with you. And the game was just so good. It's not too short, not too long. It just seems just right. But Turtles in Time is just a great game to play with your friends, and definitely had to make my top 10 list. And coming in at number 3, one of my favorite RPGs, and that is Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is just an amazing game. It has so many different outcomes in it, that are possible. And the story was so enjoyable. Even to this day, I want to say I played it as recently like a year ago. And, it's one of those games you can keep going back to and playing. And just an amazing game by Squaresoft. And it really holds up. And coming in at number 2 for me, one of the greatest Zelda games of all time. And that is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. And this was just an amazing story. I remember just from the opening scene of the game, the music playing, the graphics, just got you so pumped up. And the story holds up to this day. And Zelda is just one of my favorite gaming franchises out there. And I'm so excited for the sequel to this game that's going to be coming out pretty soon here in November. And just a great game. Definitely play A Link to the Past if you've never played it before. There's several different versions of this game. You have this on the Super Nintendo, and you've got it on Game Boy Advance. They released a version of it on that. And I want to say there's a version on the GameCube as well. But definitely check this out if you've never played it. And coming in at number 1, I'm sure it's not a surprise to most of you, and that is Super Metroid. Super Metroid is probably one of the greatest games of all time. It holds up to this day. If you've never played it, definitely get it on the Super Nintendo or pick it up on the Wii Virtual Console. The game is just so great. A lot of people do speedruns of it still, and the boss fight at the end is probably one of the most epic boss fights of all time. But like I said, it still holds up to this day. I still play this game all the time. And this game just definitely stood out as the top Super Nintendo game of all time, in my opinion. And definitely check this out if you haven't done so yet. Guys, that's my top 10 list. Please tell me what you think about it. What's your top 10 Super Nintendo games of all time? I'd love to hear your comments down below. Please like the video, and guys, as always, I'll see you next time.